You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
I don't have my script up, so what's my next line?
Welcome to episode 92 of the Life in Ruins podcast, where we investigate the careers of those living life in ruins. I am your host, Carlton Gover, and I am joined by my co-host, Connor Johnin. In this episode, we are joined by Megan Kumorek, who is a writer and creative partner for the Middle East, North Africa, and Mediterranean Archaeology Publication Group, and promotional and academic partner for the Save Cultural Heritage Group. Megan, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm doing fairly well. My cat was very upset that I kicked her out of the room today, but she'll forgive me eventually.
Cats are easy like that. They're easy to forgive. So right now you're recording from somewhere in England, correct? Where are you based?
So I'm in southwest London. So currently it's not even 5 o'clock and the sun's going down, and I am very sad about it.
Yeah, I can see your window through your video, and it looks rather depressing and dark and cold outside. And I'm so sorry. It's 9:30 in the morning here in Colorado, so I have a bright day ahead of me.
Also, this is David, not Connor. Actually, I can be Connor if you guys need me to. When I was in London, I was like, I've always been told it rains and it's like dark and dreary. And I thought that was like just an American thing to make us sound better. It was actually dark and dreary the entire time I was there. So checks out. But it was a lovely city. I thought it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I really like it. I come from Arizona, which is one of the sunniest states you could ever find yourself in. So coming here, I think the biggest culture shock is just no sun, and it's very wet all the time.
Yeah.
Very different than Arizona, which is just super sunny and abundance of heat and like zero precipitation all year round.
Yeah.
So you said you grew up in Arizona, or you're from Arizona. Is that where you like spent most of your childhood, or?
Yeah, so born and raised in Mesa, Arizona, and Gilbert, Arizona. Technically it's Higley, but Higley doesn't exist anymore. A whole post office debacle, if you ever want to know. But yeah, I grew up there, born and raised, and I even got my undergraduate degree from Northern Arizona University, which it actually snows there, so it's not all hot and sunny, but there was still sun even when it snowed.
That's up in it's not Flagstaff.
It is Flagstaff, yeah.
Is it Flagstaff? Okay, it's the only place I know that snows there. So how do you have a non-Arizona accent?
Oh my God, that's a great question. So my father is Mexican-American, and my mom's side of the family is Eastern European. Now, they've assimilated very well. They sound very American, but growing up, I started studying a lot of different languages, and it morphed my accent from a very early age. And it doesn't help that I used to be an opera singer, so I was properly trained with all the vowel sounds. And then I moved here, and it just hasn't gone back since. Wow.
That is unique and really cool, actually. Opera singer.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that real quick before we dive into it?
Yeah, 100%. Even though I knew I wanted to be an archaeologist at a young age, I found myself doing things as like a competitive dancer. I was an opera singer, so I sang for the state of Arizona a few times. And then I was also in chemistry club and physics club. I just kept bouncing around to different activities until I landed on having to go to university and settling down as an archaeologist.
Wow. You are classically trained. That is pretty cool.
Absolutely. So kind of like you talking, going back to kind of your experiences growing up, like what were your first experiences in anthropology or archaeology in Arizona? Like, were you a dinosaur kid, history buff, or nature nerd?
So I was a dinosaur kid, but it's not exactly a dinosaur kid. So I grew up watching Jurassic Park, as one does. And my first instinct wasn't, oh my gosh, dinosaurs are so cool. It was, Mom, you can dig up old things in the ground? And she just looked at me like, yes, you can dig up old things. And I went, that's what I want to do. So she turned half of our backyard into a sand pit and would bury my toys in the sand in Arizona summers. And I would just excavate meticulously to try to find them, then clean them and display them. And my mom was like, at this point, I kind of wish you were a dinosaur kid, because at least we'd have like cool things to bury, but I'm just burying Barbie dolls and Legos, and it's not as fun.
I think,
David, didn't you used to like wrap up G.I. Joes in toilet paper and bury them in the backyard?
The audience knows this. I tell it every time someone says this, but it's so funny that we all do the same thing. But I would bury G.I. Joes, or it was actually Max Steel, because it was like the off-brand. And I'd bury them, and then I wanted to like take it to the next level as like an artistic thing, and I wrapped them in toilet paper, and then I would like dig them up 7 weeks later, and I was like, look, it's a mummy.
You have to let it age in the ground a bit.
Yeah, it's a good year, or a good month, I would say, to age it. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, Jurassic Park kid. I think we're all that. What one was your favorite?
So I love the first one, probably because that's obviously the first one I watched. And then I'm a sucker for the third one as well. I just thought the cinematography was great in the third one, and I really liked just the thrill of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the you get intimate, or not intimate with the raptors, but like you learn a lot more about the raptor culture and stuff. I thought that was really cool.
I used to love the third one until, I mean, I know this is like extremely recent within like the past 5 years where they figured out like the true like anatomy of Spinosaurus aegypticus, and it's like not bipedal, and it was probably just a very large crocodilian. So I just can't watch it the same. I'm like, it shouldn't be doing that.
The only way I can watch them now and try to like put my scientific brain on the back burner is knowing, okay, they've mixed DNA with frogs and things. So technically, these aren't what the dinosaurs would look like. They fully acknowledge this. It's fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I loved it. But I guess getting back to anthropology, so you liked ancient stuff, your parents said, or, had that conversation. And then you went to, was your first school Northern Arizona?
Yes.
What was that like? And like, what'd you do for your field school?
So originally I was trying to figure out what university to go to, and obviously I'm an Egyptologist now, so the question was, do I go straight into that, which probably would have been smarter in the long run, because that's really difficult to do, or do I want to go the more general archaeology, anthropology route? And I decided I wanted to do anthropology first to get a great foundation, more holistic approach. And I found Northern Arizona University, and I was like, yes, that's where I want to go. So when I got there, I ended up specializing in Mesoamerica, and my first field school was actually in Peru. So I worked in a giant sand dune, which is basically like being in Arizona and Egypt at the same time. So that actually worked out pretty well for me. And it was great. We excavated a ceremonial burial site, and what it was you had a cemetery off to one side, then you had a mortuary temple in another, and they ceremoniously buried that. So we're actually digging up what ancient people already buried for us, and that was very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of that sand pit in Peru, was that on the Peruvian coast?
So it was right outside of Nazca. So yeah, I got to hang out the Nazca lines and everything, and then go to a sand dune just about an hour drive from the main collection of petroglyphs, which was really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Did you see any planes or spaceships land on the lines?
No, unfortunately. I really tried. I even tried drinking a lot of pisco, got really drunk, hoping maybe, but no, nothing.
Okay, I respect that answer.
So when you started at in Flagstaff, were you originally an anthropology major, or did you start somewhere else and then transfer? So you started as anthro.
Yes, I started as an anthropologist, and I emphasized in archaeology, and that was like from the get-go. I knew that's what I wanted to do, and then it was just a matter of finding what specialty I wanted to do within anthropology. So that's why I went to Peru. But then we had a man from Belize, Dr. Jaime Alwe, who's extraordinary. He brought his Mayan field school to Northern Arizona. And I never looked back since. I started doing Mayan archaeology from there. I went from going from Inca to Maya, and then did a more holistic approach to that. But no, I 100% always wanted to do anthropology so that I could do linguistics, I could do archaeology, I could do bioforensics, and kind of get a more, I don't know, like I keep saying holistic, but like get that whole entire picture of what it means to be human. And I even did at one point flint napping. So I got to throw an atlatl, which is a really cool throwing spear, in a blazer in high heels in the middle of a field, just because it was my lunch break and I wanted to test out what I made.
We need to hang out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you did 2 field schools in undergrad? You did one for Peru, and then you're like, you know what, that was awesome. I'm going to go to the jungle next in Belize.
Yeah, and it was great because they said, like, okay, you already have a field school under your belt, so you can actually help us do a supervision for 2 different sites. So I got to supervise my own little team while still being within like that field school realm. So I got to help the baby archaeologists learn how to set up a unit. But then I also got to go off and excavate temples, tombs, pyramids. And then I even helped collect carbon data from a cave. So we went spelunking, got to do that to look at climate change and human interactions with cave sites.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I can't top that. I don't think any guest can really top that we've had. Congrats.
Thanks.
You get the award. So one thing that impressed me about your CV is that you just have your master's. I don't think you're in your PhD yet, but or not yet. Maybe you don't want one. But one thing I love to promote is like we're always pressured to get our PhDs or like, you know, go on to be a tenure track, but like you just have your master's and you're killing it. So like,
thank you.
Yeah, it just impresses me. And you have this like huge background in doing this stuff, like even as an undergrad and whatnot. So I was going to say, like, I've been very fortunate in that regard. And like you say, we have that pressure to get a PhD. And the only reason I really want one is just because I want one. I really don't feel like it's needed. Put the doctor on there. Yeah, I don't think it's needed in the 21st century with how much we can do and want to do. The only way it really comes down to a necessity is, at least in Egyptology, it's very hard to get permits as a foreign excavator. So having a PhD does help. And because Egyptology is still very much rooted in classicism, it kind of, you're more taken seriously with the PhD. So right now, me and a bunch of other colleagues are trying to break down that barrier. So I'm in no rush to get the PhD. I am very happy with what I can do. And I think, we should be promoting people to get at least a master's and hang out and enjoy learning versus feeling like it's like a pressured thing. Chris, make that the soundbite for the episode. That was perfect. And segueing from that, I guess I was going to ask you what led you to choose or where you went to grad school and whatnot. Yeah, awesome answer. So the Belizean professor that I mentioned, Dr. Jaime Alway, he got his PhD at University College London. And I had talked to him about what I wanted to do as an Egyptologist, because at the end of the day, it's where I wanted to go. It's what I wanted to find myself doing. And he suggested look at University College London. So I did. And right off the bat, I told them I'm interested in ancient graffiti. I studied ancient graffiti in the Americas, and I compared it to modern Native American graffiti. And I love just seeing how graffiti can transition through time. And UCL told me, go to Oxford. There is a professor there, Dr. Froude. She's amazing. You should, reach out. So I did. And unfortunately, she had a medical condition that was not allowing her to accept students. I still got the interview, but at the end of the day, didn't work out. But at the same time, I was also talking to University of Liverpool, and Liverpool said, no, Oxford is great. That's where you should go. But depending on how that works out for you, let us know, and then we'll start the interview process and everything. And I was like, okay. I woke up, I got the rejection letter from Oxford. I was devastated. And then the next day, I automatically got an acceptance letter from Liverpool. And I went, well, I guess I'm going to Liverpool. They didn't even give me a chance to interview. They were just like, no, take her. Oxford's not going to have her. And I didn't look back.
A rejection letter from Oxford's not as bad as a rejection offer from University of Florida, Ohio or something ridiculous.
That's a good point, man.
It's like Oxford. I mean, that's not too bad. That's all right. But so you ended up going to Liverpool, and at Liverpool, because we've had a number of English trained archaeologists on at this point. What was your research on, and did a thesis come out of it, like a publication?
So unfortunately, not a publication, mostly because University of Liverpool, they never promoted publishing your work as a master's student. They only pushed that for PhD students, which is another issue I have with British educational systems, but that's a topic for another day. But basically, it wasn't fostered, it wasn't supported. So for me, my thesis grew and died in university. But my research was looking at Theban temple graffiti. So if you know, the Temple of Luxor, really big. They just opened up the mortuary path for that. There was a big ceremony in Egypt. But I look at graffiti there, and everyone asks, oh, is that the graffiti where tourists do graffiti? Or, oh, is it just crude images? And then I show them the graffiti, and they're full-on images of gods and full-on written inscriptions. And my favorite from my thesis, because I was looking at how graffiti can communicate without having to necessarily know everything about the culture. It's just all communicating either, yes, this is a god, or yes, this is my power structure. But my favorite one, which demonstrates this perfectly, is there's a graffito of a god. And he has a very large phallus, and it cracked me up when I found it because it's beautifully done. Not just the phallus, the whole thing. And it has an inscription. And the inscription basically reads that this priest had fixed up the graffiti, that he preserved it, and he's so great for preserving this heritage. And then you actually do analysis on the graffiti, and he just enlarged the phallus. And that's what he thought was his greatest accomplishment. And honestly, humans haven't changed.
That is awesome and hilarious and really intriguing at the same time. Wow. Well, I guess one aside, and I have another question. I was told by my archaeology professors in college that like there are far more phalluses like in the ancient world than like most textbooks want to show. And I did some research on that, and it is not a lie. Like they're all over. Not to stay on the phallus thing, but in terms of like graffiti, do you think graffiti is like innate, or like it's not an option? Like it just humans have to do it?
Yeah, I would say that graffiti is a byproduct of us wanting to impose ourselves on a landscape. And you tend to find it on landscapes where humans don't feel that they have agency. So when I studied Mesoamerican graffiti, it was the Maya coming back to these temples and pyramids that their ancestors lived in. And they wanted to reconnect and replace themselves on the landscape. So they sort of mimicking things that they saw. So they were writing down glyphs that they could not understand, but they were doing it to show presence in their ancestry and their history. If you go to modern graffiti, obviously we say, oh, that's like a restricted area, or that's somewhere where the public generally can't go, or, oh, I'm just told I can't do certain things here. And we start to impose our presence further by writing our names or saying that we've been here, just to show that even though there might be policies or something in place that restrict our access, we're going to overcome those and show that we're human, we're allowed to be here, and this is my marker for it.
That's also a great soundbite. The like cave art and stuff like that, and like hand sprays and all that ancient art. Like, do you think that also too is the same thing? Like like imposing yourself on the landscape, but also does it relate to places they don't have agency kind of thing? That's interesting.
Yeah, so I would say in forms of maybe not feeling they have agency, it doesn't necessarily have to come from a public policy figure. Obviously, if you look at cave graffiti of handprints and things, it's more so showing that you have agency to be either coexisting with or being a part of your landscape. So you have that agency to transform the world around you and place yourself within it. So by putting your hand on a wall, not only are you showing that, yes, you were there, but that you have the ability to transform that and exist within it. And you're not separate from that conversation of, is this a cave and am I a human? It's, we are one and the same, and we are part of the same story.
Whoa. Okay. That's it for me. That's really cool.
And with that, we'll be right back with Megan Kumorek after these messages. And welcome back to episode 92 of a Life in Ruins podcast. We're here with Megan Kumorek, and we are going to continue our discussion on Egyptology because Megan is an Egyptologist. So what was that transition like, going from New World monumentality and excavations in Peru and Belize to then focus to changing? Because you wanted to be an Egyptologist. That was kind of the goal, right? So what helps you with that transition of going to Egyptology?
That's a great question. I don't think anything could ever prepare you for switching careers in whatever it is that you do. But some of the things that might have eased the transition a bit was just being able to have excavated so many various things and have such a wide range of information that I have from other cultures, so that when I ended up in Egypt, I could be like, okay, I know how to excavate temples. Put me in that temple. I can excavate that. Oh, I know how to excavate mud bricks and housing. Put me in that. I could do that. Oh, you need me to identify ceramics. Well, I have 2 different cultures that do ceramics completely different depending on the time frame. So I know a wide range of that. So I could probably help you with that as well. And it all came down to the fact that the place I went to work in Egypt, they never accepted anyone that wasn't already in a graduate program. And at that time, I had just finished my bachelor's and I hadn't yet started my master's. But they said, no, just come. We have faith in you. And by the end of it, they were like, yeah, we're going to have to invite you back every season because that was incredible. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to tell my professors at NAU that because they'll be very proud.
Good for you. Yeah.
Excellent. So what was that field work like? Because you worked at a place called I
can say it if you want.
Yeah, please do.
So it's Qom Al Ahmar Qom Wasit. I speak Arabic, so surprise. And basically it is northeast of the city of Alexandria. So it's in the Delta, and it's not as deserty as you'd expect. There is farmland. It is grassy and wet. That's why you get a lot of mud brick structures. But that excavation, it was incredible. It's basically, we think it might be a lost city of sorts, but I don't know how much I'm allowed to say. But it's like Ptolemy had written in his accounts of a city that used to exist, and we're hoping that this is the city, because we have on the surface layer, we have one of the largest bathhouses that has ever been found in Egypt. And then lower down, you have more Hellenistic and, late dynasty Egyptian houses as well. So it goes everywhere from 400 BCE to just before Cleopatra and things like that.
I don't know much about Egyptology. Like, I just, in general, there's pyramids, and then like a couple thousand years later, there's Cleopatra. Yeah. And everything in between for me is a bit fuzzy, because the history, I guess like how much we know about Egyptian history is so vast in comparison to other places due to the written documents.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look at Cleopatra, she lived closer to our time than she did to the Great Pyramids. So even for her, she was the only person in the Ptolemy dynasty to actually retain holding the ancient Egyptian language that she wanted to speak it. But really? Everyone else at that time was just like, no one speaks ancient Egyptian anymore. We can't really read the hieroglyphs. And she just went, nope, I've kept up on my studies. I can do these things. So she was definitely more of a figure than people realize. And yet she was still so far removed from the culture she represents.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. So I guess with Ptolemy and like the Macedonians like moving into there, it was making me think. So in Jerusalem, it kind of like when I was visiting there, blew my mind, like looking around at like the tells, like you got like Ottoman stuff and then like Roman stuff and then Greek, and then it just keeps going down. Like that was wild to me. So in Egypt, it's like more than that, because you have like so many kingdoms there. I didn't even think about that. That's got to be a mess.
It is thousands of different historical layers that you have to go through. And the interesting thing is, people don't realize that Egypt was conquered multiple times by various cultures since its beginning.
Like everyone.
But one thing was with Egypt was everyone that conquered fell in love with Egypt, and they retained the religions and the arts and the historical dress, to the point where you can even see when the Romans did conquer and invade, they started making mummies that kind of resembled ancient Egyptian mummies, and they were doing mummy portraits to kind of put their own little mark on it. But Egypt, the only reason we don't think of it as such a vastly changing, super conquered place is because people loved it so much. And I guess nothing has changed in that regard either. We still love it, and we still kind of want to emulate it.
Yeah, I think people perceive of Egypt as kind of like this, like it developed in a vacuum, like it's always been Egypt. It's been Egypt every time. And as you were talking about, it has like a rich history of continuous episodes of cultural transition, cultural evolution. Like it didn't just stay stagnant from like 6,000 BCE up until like, today. That it like any other culture, it experienced fluctuations in material culture and ideologies and whatnot. So it was like really cool to hear you talk about that. And so when you were working there, were you working under Egyptologists? Do Egyptian archaeologists working in Egypt call themselves Egyptologists or just archaeologists?
Yeah, okay. Ooh, there's like a lot to unpack on that one, because Egyptology alone, I'll start with that. Basically, we're having a discussion currently in Egyptology of what permits someone to call themselves an Egyptologist. And modern academics are saying if you study ancient Egypt, you can be an Egyptologist. You don't need to have a graduate degree. So I think there are a lot of Egyptians that do work on projects that would consider themselves Egyptologists, or at the very least archaeologists. And the biggest thing with Egyptian excavations is, no matter if you're working with a Egyptian university or working with the head person being of Egyptian descent, you always are also working with workmen called kuftis. And kuftis is a very honorable position for ancient Egyptians. They are basically raised as a kufti from birth because their father was a kufti. And the kufti job title basically says that they will be hired on to work at sites, and they will lead the team of excavators that aren't the researchers, but they'll employ the locals, they get everybody together, and they help with the excavations. And so it's interesting to see how dynamic an Egyptologist really can be, because you have the academics who are the Egyptologists, but then you have the local kuftis and the local workmen who would, I would say, consider themselves researchers in Egyptology. So 100%, I think they're Egyptologists.
That's really interesting. Carlton, like with working with indigenous tribes here and stuff like that, like we have tribal like leaders and members come work on sites here because, you know, it's their land and their history. I did not think about that in Egypt. Like there's probably direct descendants of, wow. Yeah. And I think, did Raven talk about kuftis? I've heard that word before, maybe. I don't know.
She may have. It's been a long time since episode 7.
Maria, maybe. Anyway. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's been a nice honor, I guess, to work with the locals because I did it in Belize as well, except the difference was that the locals there actually were permitted 3 months time off from their work in order to actually work with us on excavations. So it was like this big community event where in Egypt, it's more of your job. Your job is an excavator. It's cool to see how different areas and different cultures involve themselves in the excavations of their own history to various degrees. And I like that.
I think I knew there were Chinese students that worked with us in Wyoming on a field project. And they were like, one, shocked at how hardworking Americans are. Like we're just out in the desert, like scorching ourselves, dying of thirst, but loving it. But they were saying that they have like workers that do all that for them. And they just kind of stand and like watch and direct it. And they were like, well, these people are animals. Like just like all of us just out frying ourselves.
Didn't they ask where are the peasants? Like where are the excavators?
Yeah, they like said something. I guess it didn't translate like correctly. They probably meant something a little more like, you know, lighter, but that's what they said.
Where are my plebs?
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Like the rest of the world has that.
Yeah, I
one
think
kid thought he was in jail because he had to dig sand, eat oatmeal. I heard the stories of this and it always cracks me up.
it is a thing that you see, especially in classical studies, is we do have excavators that work alongside you. So obviously my field schools in Peru, I had no help. That was just me. In Belize, I did most of the work myself, but we had some workmen who were also taking the plaster from the excavations we were doing and then using them to make new bricks to form new temples, like preserve the temples we're excavating. So that was like nice. Sometimes they'd help me carry something. But then Egypt, you have the full-on workforce, and I have my supervisor just sitting there drawing up something, doing some notes, and then will look at me and be like, okay, now go help them. And I'm like, okay, I'll go lift this and excavate this. And there were so many times I had to tell the excavators to be like, just please leave me alone. I want to dig my little circle. I'm okay.
Yeah. Man, Egyptology sounds fun. Like, I think everyone wanted to do that as a kid. Like my dad last night was watching a documentary. I don't think it was Zahi, but something. And like everyone's just fascinated, especially like middle-aged old men, like love Egypt. But yeah, it's just, we're all fascinated by it. But I guess the next thing we were going to ask you is like, where are you hoping to get a PhD, or like, what would you like to do with that? But we still have 8 minutes in this segment. Are you able to just nerd out about Egypt like for a bit? Cause like, we don't get too many Egyptologists.
Yeah. Excavating in Egypt is definitely on my archaeology bucket list. Like I have a couple places where I'd love to work at least just once.
Well, the nice thing is if you do work in Egypt as an excavator, or you just work with a team, you actually get an antiquities pass, which allows you to go and see sites either for free or at a discount. So I 100% took advantage of that and went from Alexandria to see different sites there, all the way to the pyramids, got a walk in that. And I was like, oh gosh, this is incredible. But working in Egypt is definitely not the easiest thing. I know I had been talking to people obviously about just like all of the laws that go into it. And originally we know King Tut, we have, the British went in there, they excavated, they took out all of these luscious trinkets and beautiful emblems and obviously his mummy. And that was 1912. And now you can't even take anything out of the country with at all. There's no permits you could even get to do that. It has to stay in Egypt, hence why they just made the Egyptian museum that they just did, which shows the artifacts up for viewing gallery. And then underneath, they have a giant lab, so you can actually start scanning mummies. Because I know recently they did Amenhotep I. His mummy is one of the few that have never been unwrapped. And because there wasn't really a lab to scan his body in, they took a scanner in the back of a pickup truck, drove it to the original museum, and then they put his mummy in the scanner in the back of the truck in the center of a garden of this museum just to scan him. And it shows how innovative we can get, yet how limited we are in some of our accessibilities.
I love that meme going around that's like, fun fact, the reason why the Great Pyramids are in Egypt is because they were too heavy to take to the British Museum.
Yeah. I love that one so much because I think we do have the only figurine ever discovered in the Great Pyramid is obviously out. I think it might be in the British Museum. And I'm just thinking, of course, you had to take the one thing that you could grab and it wasn't the pyramids themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ancient Egypt's great. I would say, depending on where you're excavating, you're going to get a different experience. So I excavated in the north, so you have a lot of Roman, Greek influence, and that's a lot more layers to go down with varying degrees of history. But then if you're more in the south parts of Egypt, then you have stuff that like my research was based on, which is all the temples and monuments. And then you have the Valley of the Kings, Valley of the Queens. Like I'm wearing Nefertari earrings right now, and she's in the Valley of the Queens. So she's pretty badass. But there's like a whole different things.
The cool earrings on, but like the grain, I couldn't tell if they were Egyptian or not.
I don't know if you can see them.
Whoa, that's pretty sick.
Yeah.
Sorry, interrupted, but
no, you're fine. You just get a varied experience depending on where you are and what you're excavating. But you're always going to find sand. So at least if you like sand, come excavate in Egypt.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I found at one point I was excavating in Komwasit. I was excavating a little temple that had been reused as a house. And I had excavated this giant pot that I could have fit in. It was flipped upside down. Don't know why. Still don't know why. It was put in a wall. Very, very weird.
Huh.
And I remember excavating that, being exhausted. I let the Kufti lift this thing out. And while they were doing that, I was just building little sandcastles next to our site, because I was like, well, I have extra water that I'm not going to finish up. And everyone looked at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, hey, if I bury this and you find it in 10 years, it's archaeology. It's fine.
That's a good question too, I guess. Here, it's like 50 years as an artifact. Like, how does that work in Egypt?
I
assume you were joking, but...
Yeah, it's kind of difficult, I guess, in Egypt, because the original definition would just be, as long as it's not a culture that is currently existing, then it's an artifact. But now, as we're having modern conversations of what really denotes an ancient Egyptian and our modern populations, still the existing population of an ancient Egyptian, it's becoming a bit more fuzzy. And I think that's why there's so many antiquities laws now that say you can't excavate, they limit how many foreign excavators can come in, basically. And that helps to make the excavations less problematic in a sense, because we do have to excavate. Unlike some areas we could just do ground penetrating radar. The locals in Egypt, they tend to need to see to believe, and a lot of their expansion projects for modernization don't really care unless they find something significant. So there's been so many sites that have been bulldozed over or built on top of simply because the cultural significance wasn't proven to them. So it's this whole balancing act of, is this an artifact? Is it something we should excavate? Well, yeah, we should still preserve it because it's going to be bulldozed if we don't. And it's very stressful and difficult. So as much as Egyptology is a lot of fun, I have to drink a lot of caffeine to stay sane.
I think, yeah, that's kind of common in archaeology.
Yeah. Do you have any specific questions with Egyptology that I could answer for you?
Yeah, I guess what time period do you work at? Like, what is your cultural focus? Like, what age range are we looking at for your particular focus in Egyptology?
Okay, so that would be third intermediate period. I'm trying to remember the dates on that. Let me Google that. Because sometimes I'm just like, yeah, third intermediate period. No one ever questions that because everyone knows what I'm talking about. And then I just forget what that is.
Normally I would say don't mind, but we actually do get emails being like, actually?
Yeah. Okay. So third intermediate period. So basically what I look at is, so 1075 BCE to roughly, probably like 75 BCE. So like about 1,000-year span. But I specialize in what's called like a transition period, an intermediate period, and it shows power dynamic shifting from one case to the next. And in mine, the pharaohs of the time were losing power. And if you look at the Temple of Luxor, Temple of Karnak in Thebes, the priests were actually gaining power. They were taking the power over from the royals of the time, of the kings. And that's what my graffiti then looks at, is how the priests are using the graffiti to land themselves on this landscape to show power. So a lot of the graffiti that I look at would be the priests mimicking royal iconography. And there's one where a priest puts himself as the pharaoh. And in the image that he's mimicking, which is right across from him, it's in the same temple, the image is the pharaoh with his sons lined up. So the priest has him with his sons lined up, and then the pharaoh has him with his daughters, and the priest has done the same thing. And it's this look of taking that power, seizing the opportunity to gain control in the southern part of Egypt, away from pharaonic rule and into more priestly rule, which I guess we can see in modern times too, when churches tended to want to take control and take power, and you have the Pope who then can appoint a king and that whole dynamic. So it's definitely nothing new.
That's fascinating. Is that what you would like to do for your PhD, or is that something different?
No, it is. It's definitely what I would like to do for my PhD. My PhD, I want to look at the political implications of graffiti and how graffiti, as we had previously mentioned, yes, it is you're self-imposing your autonomy on a landscape, but it can also be to seize something from that landscape. And so to gain power, to gain control, to gain influence, because everyone that's going to access this temple are already the elite. And so the elite don't really need to be persuaded through graffiti. It's more for the public who are coming to the outsides of the temple or to like a main sector of the temple for ritual purposes, that are going to see these graffiti and they're going to say, oh, that looks just like that. Oh, I know that priest, and oh, I good for them. Like they have power here, and I recognize that. And I want to kind of look at how graffiti can be used as propaganda and can help gain control in a politically tight spot.
Excellent.
All right.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we're going to go ahead and we'll be right back with episode 92.
Welcome back to segment 3 of episode 92 of a Life in Ruins podcast. I was born in 92, so that's the only reason I remember that. We're going to talk now about 3 things. 1, I was going to make a joke about phalluses, but we're not going to do that. 2, I had this in my head. Hang on. I just didn't want to say that. Yeah, let's talk about video games. There we go. Chris, keep that in. People need to know that I can't speak. So Assassin's Creed, Tomb Raider, all those kind of things. Let's nerd out.
Yeah? Okay. Well, I guess where to start, 'cause the whole thing is I'm a video game nerd, love video games. It's bordering on obsession, but I think that's normal. I mean, I have an Assassin's Creed Apple of Eden, so everyone needs at least one.
God.
Yeah.
At least one? Yeah.
It comes with a little stand, too. It's adorable. It's from Assassin's Creed Origins. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have a bookshelf with all the Halo books, Halo Mega Blocks, and Halo games right behind me that I block when we record, but it's right down there.
No, never hide the nerd.
I think Black Flag was my favorite of the Assassin's Creeds, but the third one, because you're in Iroquois, was really cool. And I went to a medieval festival, a Renaissance festival, and they had his like tomahawk, and I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
And the blade and stuff too. Anyway, so
it's amazing.
Yeah, it was cool. Oh, Egyptology, phalluses, and video games. And I was going to make a joke. Anyway, just came back to me.
So when it comes to how archaeology is depicted in video games, you have things to say. So let's start with like a classic that deals with archaeology. Maybe one of the first video games that talk about it in like the 3D world, talking about like PlayStation 2, Tomb Raider. What are your thoughts?
I used to love Tomb Raider, and I didn't actually realize there were games until after the Angelina Jolie movie came out. And my mom was like, yes, there's video games. And I went, how did I not know this? And then I started doing a deep dive on all the video games on my PlayStation. And I don't regret it. But it's interesting. They did like their reboots and they make it known that, yes, she has an archaeology degree. And I went, well, that's nice. She has a degree. She's still not doing archaeology, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's like, it's kind of like grave or temple robbing, right? From my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
it's
guns. Mostly like her wanting to find artifacts and stuff. They reboot it where she is looking for a lost city of Yamatai, which is in the Dragon's Triangle, and she gets stranded on an island and has to survive. And then the second one is her looking for another lost city. And the third one is trying to end the apocalypse. And I'm just like, if she just stayed out of a lot of this, it wouldn't happen. Just stop looting tombs.
Yeah.
It's all self-inflicted. Like there's no reason. Like if you just stop Lara Croft, then none of this would happen to you. Go publish.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
Get your tenure track.
Yeah, right. So two that you had mentioned that I hadn't realized that talk about archaeology. One is World of Warcraft, which I played briefly back when it was free up to level 20. And then I stopped because I wasn't paying for that. And then Sims 4. So how is archaeology depicted in both of those games?
So it's interesting. Archaeology was introduced into World of Warcraft with the Cataclysm expansion. And basically, it is a secondary skill that you can get. And what will happen is if you're an archaeologist in the game, you get 4 different places on your map that you have to go look at. And they usually have like 4 different cultural groups. And then you go there and you have to survey the land. And you'll find little remnants of things that will give you more backstory and lore of Azeroth. And I thought that was kind of cute. And I did make a note. So which one was it? Oh, yes. The Lore Walkers. So there's Mists of Pandaria, which is the panda expansion, if anyone who's like knows World of Warcraft. Because yes, you can play as a panda now. But they have things called Lore Walkers, and they obviously know the history and the lore, and you can befriend them, and it gives you perks in archaeology. But it's very much still that like treasure hunting aspect in my regard, where you're still going to different places and you're still just looking for little tidbits. But at least they have it in a sense where there's an excavation site and there's a survey that is done. Whereas The Sims has you actually like explore temples and you're finding little artifacts and you can bring them back to your own house and put them in your cabinet of curiosities. So the two of them are still, they're vastly different, but they all play on that idea of exploration and I'm going to keep everything I find, and it's great.
I love how in World of Warcraft, archaeology is a secondary skill, and it's so sad, but also I think accurate with how many people who have archaeology degrees but actually go into something else. So
I didn't even think about that. That is so true.
It's like, oh well, okay, sweet.
Yeah,
my first class is a ranger, but I also do archaeology on the side. It's like, all right, yeah, okay.
Yeah, like I'm a rogue archaeologist. That sounds accurate.
In Zelda, since like the games always have like deep antiquity and like, you know, there's like previous incarnations of Zelda and they're like the different like, you know, kingdoms and stuff. There's always like a Goron archaeologist, like one of the races in the game. And he's always like looking for something. It's a quest to like help him. I think he was in the Wind Waker and in the most recent one as well. And I think Twilight Princess. So that's a thing. And then Carlton and I played Jedi Fallen Order last year, 2 years ago. And that was like a game in between episode 2 and episode 3 and episode 4. So like right after the clone army purge. Anyway, so there's like shrines to clone troopers all over the place. And like part of the game was looking at like glyphs, like, you know, to find perks and like upgrade your tier, which I thought was really cool. So like inserted that, but he wasn't an archaeologist. It was just like deep Star Wars nerdy lore. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they also do it in Dragon Age Inquisition. You actually run into a archaeologist or a scholar who's doing a survey in the land that you're at, and you have to help them find something as well. So I think a lot of games, they use it as almost a quest giver type situation. They are your dungeon master and they're giving you a quest, but they're also an archaeologist. I'm like, okay, I like it.
Awesome. I think there's some other games with archaeologists. I can't off the top of my head remember. I guess there's that movie coming out about one of them, right?
Oh, the Uncharted series with Nathan Drake. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's more of a treasure hunter.
Oh, okay. I've never played them. I just knew it looked kind of cool.
I'm Xbox, so I never had access to the PlayStation games because, like, once again, going back to Halo only comes out on Xbox, so that's where my brand loyalty lies.
I like to play too many games, so I have both.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love both of them too, but I have an Xbox. Now I'm PC Master Race, so that's good.
Yep, 100%.
And a Switch. I like Switches.
Oh, there you go.
So one of the franchises that deals with archaeology the most is definitely Assassin's Creed. And I wish they would stop making the games at this point because it's just kind of becoming ridiculous how many come out. But it goes everywhere from the first one starts in the Crusades, then you go to the Renaissance, Revolutionary War, Black Flag, and they're like, all right, let's go back to Odyssey and Egypt and Greece. So what is your perspective on, especially you being an Egyptologist and Assassin's Creed Origins, how do they represent ancient Egyptian culture in those games?
It's really interesting because Assassin's Creed Origins takes place during the Ptolemaic period, so Cleopatra time. So in the time that it's depicting, a lot of the sites that we think of when we think of ancient Egypt, like the pyramids, the Sphinx, Luxor Temple, things like that, they're already in ruin during the game. So in one aspect, it's great because you can come in and you can feel like you traveled to Egypt currently and you're seeing these sites for yourself. But then it's also interesting because you are getting this different perspective, which is unexpected, where the people in the game also think ancient Egypt is ancient and it is like mythical and magical. And you go through the entire game playing as a Magi, who is mostly like a king's guard, I guess is the best way that I could explain it. And it's his journey through trying to avenge the death of his son, all while you then have like your Apple of Eden backstory, the people who came before type of situations. And you find Cleopatra, you find her brother Ptolemy, and then you also meet Caesar, which is interesting because at the end of the game, one of their other characters is the first person to do the stabby stab with Caesar. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? Like, I understand they need to make a plot, but okay.
Fair enough. So that person that did the stabby stab, like Brutus?
It was, you would think it would be Etu Brutus, but like it wasn't. It was a character. So you play as Bayek of Siwa, and then you have his wife, Aya, and she is the one that you actually play as in the end of the game. And she is the one that does the stabby stab at the end as an assassin, because the whole game is centered around the birth of Assassin's Creed. So they become the Brotherhood, the Hidden Ones, basically. They establish the Hidden Ones to help this whole dynamic with Cleopatra and everything. And then when they feel betrayed by Cleopatra, then they go off and they kill Caesar. And they basically put Cleopatra in a position where if you betray the Egyptian people again, like that's it for you. And that's the whole theory as to then why she just, mysteriously died. Was it actually the Hidden Ones? Was it the Brotherhood? Was it the Assassins?
Got you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you being a big gamer yourself and kind of on this topic, in your experience, what franchise or game has represented archaeology most accurately, in your opinion?
I mean, Assassin's Creed, as much as it can get very fanciful, one thing I'll say is I really like the newer games that have come out because they do discovery mode and they actually work with professionals in archaeology, in history, in museums. And you can actually then go around to the sites that are in the game and you have a guided tour. They'll tell you about things. They'll tell you about the artifacts that inspired the art for the game. So let's say you're going through the Great Pyramids, for example. They will actually show you, oh, here's like the inspiration we took off of, like you can find this in this museum. And oh, this is why we painted it this color because this article from the scholar says that it was this color. And I really appreciate that. So as much as it might not be the most accurate excavating in a video game, it more so is a great resource for people who want to physically be a part of history and then get the sources to go do more like reading for themselves.
Excellent. Have you ever played Archaeology X on Steam?
I have not, but I have wanted to.
It's horrible. I can't stand that game. That's the only game I think on our YouTube channel for Life in Ruins that there's like a let's play, and it's me trying to understand Archaeology X, and it mostly 30 minutes of me trying to figure out like what I'm doing because there's no tutorial and it is just not intuitive. Yeah, I'd suggest give it a try sometime and let me know how you feel about that one.
Get very frustrated with it. It's fine.
It was different. Excellent. Well, that's good stuff. Well, which game's your favorite in general? Like, which one do you actually like playing most?
Ooh, well, I don't like Valhalla. I'm still trying to get through that. I just don't like it. They have Odyssey, which was great for the quests. I just liked going on multiple quests and riding in a boat. Origins, I liked translating the hieroglyphs that are present because the programmers of the game actually tried their best to translate Assassin's Creed doctrine into the temples. So you actually have on their poster, there's a bit where you know how it's like, what is it? Everything is, I wrote it down. Yeah. There's an Assassin's Creed doctrine that says nothing is true, everything is permitted. And they actually wrote in hieroglyphs, mentem akatem sanun. And it basically means nothing is right or correct. Everything is certain or probable. And I was like, okay, I appreciate that. And so as far as like the new 3 ones, I think it's a tie between Origins and Odyssey. But for the traditional ones, I mean, I love the first game. I love Black Flag. I think those are like my two big ones.
I really liked Unity just because I like the co-op aspect. Like I know it wasn't that big of a game and it just came out on that new generation, but like that was the only Assassin's Creed game I think I've completed.
Really?
I'm not growing up. My brother was huge in Assassin's Creed and I was bigger into Mass Effect, and we kind of, what he plays, I don't play, and what I play, but Unity was the only one where I was like, I'm going to finish this. And Black Flag, I stopped because I went through a breakup and my girlfriend at the time took Black Flag with her. So I didn't have access to it. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm done with this. And I just haven't had the chance to, because I know it's going to be a commitment if I re-download that game. And I'm just like, I need to finish a PhD.
Yeah, the new Assassin's Creed games, I think I have like 200 and something hours sunk into Valhalla. And I don't even like Valhalla, but we're going through it because I'm a completionist.
Jesus.
Oh, wow. I definitely 100%ed the first game or very close to it. And then what was the second? The Italian one, did that one. The third, loved the third one. And then Black Flag, I had always said to myself, like, I want a pirate Grand Theft Auto. And then that person at Assassin's Creed or Ubisoft was like, got you, and made that. And it was awesome. I haven't played since, what was the one after that?
It was
Black
Unity.
Flag. Was it Unity? Yeah, I didn't play Unity or anything after that, but I watched people play the Egyptian one, and that looked awesome.
Yeah, Egyptian one's good. If you like the sailing aspect of Black Flag, I would suggest going to Odyssey, which is the next one after the Egyptian one.
That's Greek, right?
Because you actually get a boat and you get a flamethrower at one point for your boat, and that's fun.
Okay.
Greek's fire. All right.
It's pretty sick.
So, and then lastly, we do want to kind of wrap up with your work for Safe Cultural Heritage Group, which is how I met you because you were my interviewer for SCHG. So what is SCHG about and what do you do for them?
So we have Safe Cultural Heritage Group, and basically it's bringing professionals in cultural heritage to media so that people can access more professionals more easily. So obviously people don't get to meet Egyptologists every day, or, plains archaeologists every day. And it's a great way for us to introduce the public to other people. So for the show that I met you on, Weekend Talk, which is what I host, we have professionals that are either in TV production, in museums, they're archaeologists, or even we actually had someone on the show recently who was an archaeologist and no longer is an archaeologist. And we talk about the economic impact of continuing archaeology. And usually people ask, oh, what's the process of getting into archaeology? What should I do? And that interview was definitely, well, if you are an archaeologist, you want to actually leave archaeology, what does that process look like? And what can you do still with your degree set, which is a great conversation to have. And that's what Save Cultural Heritage Group is all about. It's about preserving our culture and our history through real life people and their lives, both inside and outside academia, and just talking about them and learning with them what it means to be in cultural heritage and what it looks like moving forward. Yeah.
Sounds awesome. Carlton, I didn't hear your episode on that.
It hasn't come out yet.
It hasn't come out yet.
Oh, okay. I remember you saying you did that, but
I did one with the opening of the Weekend Talk a while ago when I was with, it was really weird because there's like little old me, and then the person who I was being interviewed with, she's a professor. She was on Time Team, and like I was vastly out of my league, being like there with Karen. I was just like, I have like, no one is here for me. Everyone is clearly here for Karen. So I just like tried my best, and it was, but it was fun. And then, I had the follow up with Megan, which was really fun. And I felt bad because it was late for you and early for me, kind of like it is now. And you're like, how are you doing this morning? And I was just waking up. I'm like, ugh. Yeah. But it was an excellent episode. Yeah. So that's awesome. So how often do you work with them? Like, what's your work schedule with SCHG?
So we aim to put out a new episode bi-weekly. So every fortnight, you're going to get a new episode, but we have currently been trying to record as much as possible. So it always depends on the guest's availability. And because I do work outside of that as well, it also determines my availability. So I would say if I had to average it out, it was probably one recording a week every month. It's not that difficult, but I think it's the research I put into each episode, because I want to make each episode has like the entertainment segment, like Carlton knows. And I basically have a game where you have to look at something and you have to guess something about it, and having to research all of those things. So for Carlton, we did Native American heritage sites. And I had to not only find the ones I want to talk about, but then I wanted to know all the history about them so that we could have a conversation and share that with our guests. And I think that's what takes up most of my time. So maybe like a 2-day thing every week. So it's not terrible, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Excellent. So it's been awesome having you on. I learned a lot. This was really fun. We'll definitely have you back on in the future. Before we end the show, Megan, what are a couple sources? These could be books, articles, videos, or et cetera, that you would recommend for anyone interested in, Mesoamerica, South American, and Egyptology, or video games. Let's throw that in there.
Well, play Assassin's Creed Origins and look at not the graffiti, the hieroglyphs, because I think they're great. So do that. Have fun with that. As far as books, now I have a lot of my recommendations are for Egyptology, but I would say if you want to look at Mesoamerica, just Google Dr. Jaime Awe, Jaime, Awe is Awe, Jaime Awe. You're going to get a lot of great stuff. You can also Google BVAR, which is the Belize Valley Archaeological Reconnaissance Project. And the two of them, you'll get a lot of information if you want to learn more about Mesoamerica. As far as ancient Egyptian things go, I recommend The Anatomy of a Civilization by Barry Kemp. That's really good. If you want to learn how to read ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, because everyone does, I recommend 2 books. One of them was actually my professor's. So How to Read Egyptian Hieroglyphs by Mark Collier and Bill Manley. That's great. And then Bill Manley also did another book called Egyptian Hieroglyphs for Complete Beginners, which is a lot of fun. I went back through it during lockdown in my garden. I was just like doodling different things. It's very easy to understand and go through. And you might even learn language terms you didn't realize existed. So it helps you with your modern language, your current language, which is great. And then as far as graffiti goes, because I know a lot of people are always interested in ancient graffiti and how that translates to modern graffiti. So you could look at Scribbling Through History, Graffiti, Places, and People from Antiquity to Modernity. And that is by a long list of contributors, but you have Chloe Ragazzoli, Amir Harmansa. I've never met her. I apologize. We have Dr. Salvador, Dr. Frood, and I know there's a few others, but basically you go through this book and each writer has talked about different graffiti in different time periods, some in modern, some in ancient Egypt. Dr. Frood does ancient Egypt. You'll get a nice little grasp on that. And I think those are some good places to start. There's obviously, I think we're going to put more in the description for this. So go check that out.
Excellent.
And where can our listeners find you on social media and or like academic stuff or publications?
So I am 100% on Instagram almost all the time. Probably should kick that habit, but here we are. So you can find me at Egyptian_Rose. And then for Save Cultural Heritage Group, if you just type in SCHGPK into Instagram, will come up. We also have the YouTube show Weekend Talk. Again, if you just put into YouTube Save Cultural Heritage Group, it will come up. Just look for the playlist for Weekend Talk and you'll find me. And then I also am a writer we talked about Menem Archaeology. And so we just started the Instagram for that. So MENAM Archaeology. And you'll see we just did a 7 Ancient Wonders of the World posts. You can go on there and find out some more things, because I don't think people realize there are ancient wonders of the world. And it's fun to kind of realize that the only one I think now is the Great Pyramids of Giza were both in the ancient list and in the modern list. So it's really fun to see.
Huh.
Excellent.
I would ask what the last one is, but I'll make sure people go see the post to find out.
Yeah. We'll have all that in the episode description below. And for everyone that also loves video games like Megan and ourselves, Life in Ruins has a Discord server, and I'm putting the link to that in the description below. Megan's going to be joining it, and you can find a lot of our previous guests on it, as well as me, David, and Connor often on there gaming out. So come join our Discord, come chat with us, and come play some games with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so thank you for joining us today, Megan. If given the chance, would you choose to live a life in ruins in Egypt?
I couldn't imagine my life any differently, so of course.
Good.
Excellent.
I think that is probably, I need to take an Excel sheet and figure out what the most common answer is. I think that's it.
I think Eric Robinson was the one that said no.
Yeah, he was like, no.
And so, excellent. Well, we just interviewed Megan Kumorek. You can find Megan on Instagram at Egyptian Rose, as well as her various organizations that she's affiliated with. You'll find all the links for their social media and websites in the episode description, wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Real quick, guys, we don't have a joke because Connor's not here. Before we send off our guest, I have a joke, actually, myself.
Okay.
Our joke is that we don't have enough reviews on our podcast on Apple. So if you guys could do that, I will actually, if you do it, I will send you an Ethno sticker and 2 Ruin stickers just to see if anyone actually bites at this. And if everyone does this now, like, I guess I got to send them all, but do it.
How are you going to find their contact info based on an Apple review?
We'll figure it out.
That's the joke.
I guess just DM us. And DM us, don't just DM me. Anyway, yeah. Megan, been great having you.
Yeah.
Carlton, anything else to say?
Yeah. So like as David said, please be sure to rate the podcast to provide us with any feedback, whichever podcasting platform you are using to listen to the show. Megan, it has been absolutely phenomenal to have you on. This has been absolutely great. We'll have you on again in the future, hopefully sometime soon. And with that, we are out. Thanks for listening to A Life in Ruins podcast.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Life in Ruins Podcast, and you can also email us at alifeinruinspodcast@gmail.com.
And remember, make sure to bring your archaeologists in from the cold and feed them beer.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.